all cooing, they're all saying, oh, Virginia's all blue. They're so overly confident, and you even have a lot of Republicans who are convinced that Virginia's got blue. Let me tell you something, folks. It's not true, and come this November, we're going to take back Virginia, and we're going to kick Tim Kaine out of that spot. I want to talk a little bit about history for a minute. When you think back on it, the Democratic Party once upon a time, the 1950s, 1960s, and by the way, I grew up in a completely blue area. It was completely Democrat. My dad was a longshoreman. Everybody I knew was a Democrat, my whole family. And Democrats used to say that they were the family for the working man. It's not true anymore. They turned their back on working class Americans. The Democratic Party has betrayed the very people who supported them. And this is true in so many different ways. One is on illegal immigration. And you have this steady flow of millions of illegal aliens coming across the border. Most of them just common laborers. And they come in here, they take people's jobs, and they suppress wages. And the Democratic Party's they're okay with that. And by the way, I'm a lawyer. I don't admit that too much on the campaign trail. It loses me votes. But lawyers are so liberal. They're so liberal by and large. I'm not, but a lot of us are. And I just wonder, and they're so liberal on illegal immigration too. Oh, we got to worry about these dreamers and the illegal aliens coming across the border, yada, 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 about their rights. How much you want to bet that their attitude would be a whole lot different if 1 million lawyers were coming across the border and pushing down wages of attorneys in the United States? How much you want to bet? And it's so easy for the champagne socialists, the limousine liberals, who live in their uppity neighborhoods, but they don't have problems, and their kids are going to very nice private schools, to say illegal immigration is okay. But they don't have to deal with the problems. I can guarantee you that the school where Tim Kaine's kids go to school isn't overrun by the children of illegal immigrants who don't speak English. Where 40 or 50% of the student body doesn't speak English, and the teacher is forced to spend so much of their time with those kids. And so the rest of the kids don't get the education that they need. I can guarantee you that they don't live in neighborhoods where you have MS-13 running rampant, abducting teenage girls, forcing them into the sex trade, forcing them into gangs, and if they don't do it, they assault them and murder them. I can guarantee you that the liberals who are, just allowing illegal immigration aren't worried about that. They're hypocrites. And that's the whole thing about the Democratic Party. And another issue where the Democrats turn their back on working class Americans is international trade. The Democrats say, free trade this, free trade that. And they're condemning President Trump for levying a 25% tariff on imports of steel and 10% on aluminum. Now, I'm an international trade attorney. This is my background. This is what I do for a living. I believe in free trade, but it's got to be fair trade. And let me tell you something. When it was negotiated to allow China into the WTO 20 years ago, it was done so at terms that were completely at odds with the interests of the United States. Today, if a vehicle is imported into the United States, there's a 2.5% tariff imposed on that vehicle. If a U.S.-made vehicle is exported to the European Union, there's a 10% tariff on that vehicle as it's exported to the European Union. If you want to export a U.S.-made automobile to China, there's a 25% tariff on that vehicle. 25%. American workers, American businesses are the most productive in the world. But it must be a level playing field. It's got to be fair. And what President Trump understands probably better than any other president in modern American history is negotiation. When you're negotiating a deal on behalf of American workers and American businesses, you have to be willing to walk away from the table. You have to be willing to walk out, and you have to demonstrate an ability that you will in fact impose tariffs. No, tariffs are not good, but you have to show that you're going to be tough and strong. And so that's why I'm supporting the president in the levying of these tariffs on the imports of steel and aluminum. And by the way, when he said it, he said this: if our so-called trading partners want to come to the table and negotiate away these tariffs, they can do so, but they're going to have to open up their markets to American-made products. And he's absolutely right in that. And finally, the Democrats showed their absolute disdain for traditional Americans, for middle America. They make fun of our values. They make fun of all of us who go to church, who support our Second Amendment rights. They ridicule everything we believe in. And so it was no surprise that working class people in Wisconsin and Michigan and Ohio and Pennsylvania woke up and on election day in 2016 elected a great American president of the United States who's going to defend all of our rights and make sure to ensure prosperity in the United States. And don't you think we have a great president of the United States and President Donald Trump? So I want to let you know what we really need. We control the House. Republicans control the House. Republicans control the Senate. We control the presidency. But we have to be able to get things done. And we have members of the House, members of the Senate in particular, who don't support the president. It is time that we let them know that they need to support the America First agenda. They have to support the president. And unlike Tim Kaine, who is taking every single chance he gets to undermine the president. One of the things, by the way, it's very important to Virginia that we have a member on the Armed Services Committee. We're so dependent upon military spending in this state, and we're very, very proud of it. Our ties to the military, we have 800,000 veterans in the Commonwealth. But Tim Kaine, who's supposed to be looking after your interests and after the interests of the whole Commonwealth, instead of supporting the President of the United States and bringing back jobs, bringing back prosperity, cracking down on illegal immigration, and rebuilding our military, he opposes almost the entire agenda, even opposing the 355-ship Navy, most of those ships, all the carriers, and most of the subs, which would be built right here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. That shows you one thing. Tim Kaine is not interested in the welfare of the Commonwealth. He's not interested in the prosperity of you and your families. He's interested in only one and one thing only, and that is his left-wing agenda, and that's why he's got to be removed. Now, I'm going to run a positive campaign. I can tell you this right now against my Republican opponents. And by the way, we became the very first campaign. We turned over now 2 weeks ago. Over 15,000 signatures were going to be on the ballot come this June. As a poll done recently, we've got more support than all the other Republican candidates combined. But I hope to be leading a unified ballot. And this coming November, I think the Democrats are going to be very, very surprised. In 2017, there was only one real set of elections that were competitive in the United States, and the Democrats, you got to give them their due. They took the resources from across the country, their monetary resources and their labor resources. They bussed people in from New Jersey, New York, Maryland, and they brought them down into Virginia. They knocked on every door in Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads that was unidentified. They brought those people out on election day, and they won that election. But they can't do that in 2018 There are too many targets. There are 33 Senate races across the United States. 2/3 of them are held by Democrats. They have to defend those seats. There's 435 House seats. You have scores of governorships, state legislative seats. They're going to have all of their efforts spread very, very thinly across the country. We almost won Virginia in 2016, folks. We have to get out our base. We are outspent. And here's the thing to remember. We only lost by 5%. And we were outspent. The Clinton campaign outspent the Trump campaign in 2016 7-1. 7-1. And at the end, including Heather, she was on the Trump campaign with me as well. But they pulled out, the Trump campaign pulled out staff from Virginia, sent it to North Carolina and other states that were more competitive. We could have won that election. And we will win the election in 2018. We have to have the faith that we're going to do that. We need to demonstrate, and I'm going to do this, and I've already vouched. I grew up as a Democrat. I know how they fight. And Republicans were too polite. We're playing by the Marquess of Queensberry rules. And they're coming to that fight with a knife. And I'm going to run a very aggressive, brutal, and nasty race against Tim Kaine, because that guy needs to go, and I'm not going to pull any punches to get rid of him. So I ask for your support. Hanover is a great county. You have so many Republicans here. I love it. You know, I come from Northern Virginia. My spot up there, I'm countywide elected. I'm one of 3 of the county supervisors, chairman across the state who's countywide elected. In most counties, of course, you select your chairman from among the sitting members. But in Prince William, Loudoun, and Fairfax County, you have a countywide election. It's like being mayor of the county. There's 465,000 residents in Prince William County. And I've won that at-large seat not once, not twice, but 4 times. And I've done it while cracking down on illegal immigration, cutting spending, keeping taxes the lowest in the region by 30% more than any other jurisdiction, running it as a conservative, governing it as a conservative, and winning it as a conservative. And together, when we win in November, you're not only going to have a Republican United States Senator, you're going to have a conservative who will represent all of you and make sure that we secure prosperity here in the Commonwealth of Virginia and pursue and support President Trump's America First agenda. Thanks a lot, everybody. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we had a hard time getting Northam out to fight the fight to do debates. How are you going to get Timmy out?
I'm going to ridicule him. You know, with your opponent, you have to be able to get under their skin. And he didn't say too much, but I was prodding him for weeks. And just today, I got him on this issue. And he came out and he's very, very angry. Turns out, a few months ago, his son was in Minneapolis. Did you hear about this? President Trump's having a rally. Antifa shows up. These are these cowards who, they don't have the, you know, they cover their face with a scarf. Sprayed pepper spray in the faces of elderly Americans who were waiting in line to go to that rally. They captured them. And it's Tim Kaine's son. Now, all of us can have a child that does something wrong. No question. I'm not, you know, that can happen to any of us. I've got an 18-year-old and almost a 17-year-old boy, and they're pretty good. They've never done anything like that, but they, you know, they're not perfect. But what's important here is it's not what his son did. It's how Tim Kaine reacted to it. Instead of saying that his son did something wrong, he instead said, "I'm proud of my son because he's politically active." So I've been bringing this story up for weeks, if not months, and finally Kaine reacted. He was very, very angry today. But here's the thing that Kaine cannot do, and I got to tell you, I've got a knack for it. I know how to get press. I know how to get press. I've never met a microphone I didn't like. or a camera I didn't love, and I'm going to pound him heavily and relentlessly and ruthlessly. And if he doesn't respond, that's his choice. But I can guarantee you with every single hit, it's going to take some points off. And it's going to force him to the table. It will force him into the debates. No, Mr. Nice Guy, not for me. I used to tell people when I started this job, I used to be a nice guy. Not anymore.
More questions?
Nancy?
Help us. I think we're all feeling a little, I wouldn't say we're defeated, but a little deflated, thinking that we can't get our Republican neighbors out. I mean, we know a lot of people stayed home last November.
Yeah.
There were some Republicans that were mad at Donald Trump, and so they voted for these Democrats. What can we do to try to help them in the end?
So, what I'm about to say is, I'm not saying this to kick a dead horse. I'm not saying this to be mean. I'm not saying this to, I'm not trying to violate the 11th commandment, any of that. The Gillespie campaign made a strategic error. And the error was this. So this is their thinking. That if they avoided controversies, if they wouldn't touch controversial issues like illegal immigration or protecting our historical monuments or supporting President Trump, that if they didn't touch those issues, then the Democrats would stay home. They wouldn't gin them up. But it didn't work. In fact, Ed wouldn't even show up on the same platform or stage with President Trump. He with Mike Pence, yes, but he wouldn't show up with President Trump. The Democrats came out anyway. But you know who didn't show up? Was our base. Because they see that. They're looking for a politician. If you think, most of us can remember Reagan. Reagan wasn't afraid of anything. And it was that strength, and that's what President Trump has too. People are drawn to strength. They're drawn to confidence. They're drawn to leaders who are not afraid to stand up. That's what I'm going to do. That's what I've always done. That's what you have to do. Now, the big areas, and it's not just Hanover and Goochland and the conservative counties around Richmond, and there's some in the Hampton Roads area too. But even more importantly, down in the spine, the 81 spine, the valley, and then in Southwest Virginia, South Side. The voter turnout in those areas last November was dismally low, and that is because people saw a candidate at the top who they didn't feel would stand up. And they kind of felt, well, he's not really all that different from the Democrats. Now, I don't agree with that assessment, but that's how people felt. If we had anything approaching the turnout that we had for President Trump, there's a lot of people who don't like President Trump. There's no question about that, especially in Northern Virginia. But if we had anything approaching the turnout that we had in 2016, we would have won last year. And we could win this year. And I can guarantee you one thing, is that when I win this nomination, I'm rolling out the red carpet for President Trump. Because he will bring out our base, especially in the rural areas of Virginia, especially in the valley in Southwest Virginia. We need that turnout in order to win this coming November, and we can do it. And let me just say this. We always think about the problems that we have. The Democrats have their problems too and their issues too. And it's probably even worse because Tim Kaine is trying to straddle two sides of the fence. On the one hand, he's got the Clinton Democrats, and on the other, he's got the Bernie Democrats. And the Bernie Democrats don't like him very much. So what he's going to have to try to do is to appeal to the Bernie Democrats, and the only thing they're going to listen to is far left-wing socialist talk. And every time he does that, we're going to hit him, and we're going to hit him hard, and we're going to reveal the fact that this guy is an ultra-left nutcase, and that will turn him off to your more middle-of-the-road suburban voters. That's how we're going to defeat him. Yeah.
Is that also the tactic you use to draw the independents to show that he is leaning towards socialism and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. One of the things that, I was kind of, my political thinking was formed in the Democratic cauldron of Northern Virginia. And a lot of Republican candidates think, well, we just need to share our philosophy, yada, yada, yada. No, that doesn't work. I mean, it sounds great, but it doesn't work. You can't win an election through speeches alone. You have to show action. You have to show that you're getting things done. And one thing I can tell you is that when you lower people's crime and you lower their taxes and you lower their spending and you're giving them solid, specific solutions, and you're not frightening them with regard to, you got a lot of government workers in Northern Virginia. And if you go up there and you say, hey, we're going to start laying off government workers and all that, that's the wrong thing to do. So we're not going to be doing that. We're not going to be doing any of that. But you do have to, now keep this in mind, a couple of things that the Democrats have done just terribly wrong. Number one, this just happened. Governor Northam just signed into legislation. You remember 2013, biggest tax increase in Virginia history. 2013. And they justified it saying, well, we've got bad roads. We've got all this congestion, especially in Northern Virginia and Hampton roads. So all this money raised, then they said, well, don't worry about it. We're going to be spending it on the roadways. Well, Northam just signed legislation that takes $500 million, $80 million per year, from road construction in Virginia to the failed DC metro system. Do you know how much, and Governor Northam put this into place and actually started with Kane. A roadway already constructed, Interstate 66. Taxpayers already paid for it. The Democrats imposed a toll on that road in Northern Virginia. To get from Gainesville in Prince William County into Arlington costs, are you ready for this? $40 each way. Now, I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican or an independent, but all those things add up to this. The Democrats are out of touch. They're not fixing problems. They're not giving you solutions. All they care about is tearing down historical monuments, trying to undermine President Trump, and they're completely out of touch with average voters. That's how we win. That's how we win back the middle. And that's how we're going to take back Virginia in November.
Very good.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I grew up as a Democrat as well and voted Democrat until 2012, I guess. And so I feel like I'm from their camp, so to speak. And now, I'm 100% convinced that Republican is going to be the way I vote from here on in. But the group that I've been targeting and trying to target is Christians. Mm-hmm. Because if you believe what you say you believe, there's no way you can vote for a Democrat. And I've noticed that as I visit lots of churches, I hear them, say stuff about President Trump from the pulpit. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, they have an influence on a group of people, and these people are listening to that. But so I've devised a brochure that I want to try to see if we can get this to every church. Because at first I thought it was pretty much a problem in the African American community, but I'm also seeing some of my white friends say the same thing, that they're all the way here in the Democrat Party, but they're not looking at the fact that you're voting against your conscience if you vote that way. Because they're all saying, oh, I'm pro-life. You ask them all the questions, and they line up with the Republican Party, but they're voting against their conscience. And it's just out of tradition. Feeling like, oh, if they're white, they say, I'm voting to help people. If they're black, they're saying, my family's always voted this way. This is how we do. This is the people that they're going to be helping us. And it's not the case.
Yeah.
So I really want to target these churches to get these people to know that, hey, you're voting against your conscience.
I completely agree with you, especially with regard to the African American population of Virginia. I mean, that's one of the, how do I win in Northern Virginia? I've got to win. My district is 55% minority. It voted 21 points in favor of Clinton. And, I've been able to win it 4 times. So one of the reasons is I regularly go to African American churches, and they'll usually let me speak, and at a minimum, they'll introduce me. And people will come up to me and say different things. But, one of them is, look, people support traditional marriage. They don't believe in, these transgender bathrooms being forced upon our schools. And they're pro-life. And yes, they're against illegal immigration. Too many Republicans are running away from the illegal immigration issue. Here I am in Northern Virginia leading a big crackdown on illegal immigration. I had a lot of Republicans saying, don't do it, do it, do it. We have too many minorities in Prince William County. You're never going to get reelected. They're going to hate this thing. It's one of the most important things I hear from, when I go to an African-American church is, thanks for what you did on illegal immigration, because everyone knows, I mean, the biggest group of Americans that is impacted the most by illegal immigration are African-Americans, disproportionately. One thing that we have to point out, and I think, let me just say it. Planned Parenthood is an abortion mill. Is it a coincidence? Now think about the roots of Planned Parenthood. It was formed by Margaret Sanger, a racist who wanted to keep down the African American population. Even today, Planned Parenthood has a Margaret Sanger Award. Think about this. They awarded it to Hillary Clinton. And let me ask this question. This is the question I'm going to be asking a lot of during the general election. Is it a coincidence that most Planned Parenthood clinics are in African American neighborhoods? Is that a coincidence? I don't think so. I don't think that the racist, segregationist past of the Democratic Party has gone anywhere. I think it's an evil party completely bereft of morals. And we need to point this out. They don't believe in anything but themselves. We at least have an ideology of freedom, protecting our individual rights, and securing the prosperity for this country. And that's going to come out, and I'm going to be absolutely aggressive in pointing that fact out. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Stewart, I have two questions that were sent to me by a very conservative Republican I know very well who was not able to be with us tonight.
That's fine.
His questions are, what political factors need to change in Virginia to bring it back to a solid red state?
For those of you who didn't hear that, somebody said, get rid of Northern Virginia. Well, here's something I believe in. Politics is always changing. It's always changing. And sometimes American politics is changing faster than others. When President Trump was able to grab the working class Americans, and that's how he won Wisconsin. Lots of blue collar jobs in Wisconsin and Michigan and Ohio and Pennsylvania. He almost won Minnesota, by the way, where I was born. In northern Minnesota, it's very, very blue collar, and it's moving that way. It's moving Republican all the time because people woke up and they realized, hey, the Democrats they're not representing us anymore. So what the Democrats did is they panicked and they had to come up with a competing narrative, right? They had to change the story. So this is how vile the Democratic Party is. In order to maintain power, they deliberately brought up issues that they knew were going to divide Americans by race. So what did they do? They started taking down historical monuments. We stood up to it. They're not talking about it anymore. You know why? Because it's a vote loser. But they did this deliberately because they knew that they lost the white working class in 2016, and they were on the verge of losing the African American working class and Hispanic working class and Asian working class. So I think what we need to do in Virginia is to take the roadmap that was created in 2016, speak very boldly and bluntly about the fact that we have to protect American jobs, that yes, sometimes you do have to levy tariffs in order to do that we have to protect our values and our morals. We have to stand up to political correctness because people appreciate it. You think about it. If I came up here and I just gave you some flowery speech, the same you've been hearing for years and years and years, repeating the same old lines, people are so tired of that. That's why they love President Trump, but it's not enough just to have one person who's doing it. It should be up to each and every one of us to be speaking boldly and bluntly and in a way that's politically incorrect.
Yeah.
Every morning I wake up with a resolution, I'm going to offend at least one person. But that's how we're going to do it. We're going to take the roadmap that was developed by President Trump in 2016, and we're going to repeat it here in Virginia, and we're going to win greater majorities, not just of existing conservatives who have been sitting at home during the elections, but we're going to be winning more and more working class Americans of all races. That's how we're going to do it. Yes, ma'am.
The second question, and I would, if my work at William and Mary is correct, education is a states' rights issue.
Yes.
What would you do, and I'm adding a little bit to the question this gentleman asked, but what would you do as Virginia's next senator to, in his words, stop the lopsided progressive control of education at every level from pre-K through higher education? That's a good question.
Ever since the Department of Education was created, the quality of American education has gone down. It's been an absolute disaster. And we're going to get started by actually, and I will support the president, in eliminating the Department of Education. That's what we're going to do. That's how we're going to get started. And it's absolutely true. I mean, look, I've had to govern in the real world here. I'm a local official. You know, it's a big county, but I'm a local official. It's almost 500,000 people. You know, it's one thing to be inside of a legislature, you know, just passing these bills, and they're not even thinking about the total impacts. We're the ones who have to live with it. And this is true in Virginia, too. The higher the level of regulation, the more inefficient it makes everything, the worse it is. It's one size fits all. And there's so many different things where this is the case. Medicaid, by example. This is why Medicaid, you know, health care for the poor and the elderly should not be at the federal level. It should be down, you push it down to the lowest level, probably to the state level. You're going to have a more efficient thing. That is true of education as well. Now, here in Virginia, we have all these SOLs. Let me tell you something. These SOLs, the standards for that, the questions, they're not developed by Virginians. Developed by an outside company, the Pearson Company. And it's left wing. So we have all these teachers who are teaching to the test rather than teaching their kids how to think. And that's a problem. So, and this goes for the federal. We need to remove federal standards at the federal level. Make no sense. Get rid of the Department of Education. Let it to the states. And by the way, we need to encourage the Commonwealth, once that happens, to allow localities and local school districts to set their own standards and educate their own kids. That's what we're going to do.
One more for Sue.
That's okay. I got all night.
My 44 years as an educator of children with blindness and vision impairment in this Commonwealth have to be, and I've worked in public schools across the state of Virginia and through the state agency for the blind and vision impaired, and I spent the last 3 years trying to improve the Code of Virginia relative to services for the children that I've worked so hard for over time. And while I absolutely, positively, in theory, agree with what you just said, I have to also say and look at it from the standpoint of the impact it will have not only on my children who have good brains, just poor eyesight, but all the children who have been deemed special needs, whether they have an intellectual disability, a physical disability, an emotional disability, a behavior disability. Where is there discussion and dialogue about what's to happen with my children relative to, let's just blanket get rid of the Department of Education and leave it to the localities and the states to do this. And I know that sounds contradictory to what I just said, but I do believe that education is a states' rights issue. But I also fervently believe that we have an obligation to educate our children, and my kids have certain needs. Some of them are just accommodations, equipment. It took a solid year for one of my kids' parents to get that particular school division to buy into getting him a piece of equipment that now allows him to function totally independently. And this boy is a genius.
So
Where
here,
do we go?
so you know what? You know who's most responsive for all of that? How the money should be spent on our educational system? How it's most efficiently spent? That should be written by you on the local level. I mean, do you really think that somebody in the United States Senate and the House of Representatives, some bureaucrat in Washington, D.C., knows better what's good for your kids than you do? I'm not talking about funding here. I'm talking about who's controlling our kids' education, who's designing it. And that belongs at the local level.
Thank you. Questions? Any more?
I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
I would hope that whoever gets the nomination from our party, that all the fellow competitors for that slot come together strongly endorsing that candidate, rather than leaving fragments here and there of disgruntled people because their candidate didn't make it.
Yeah.
So I would hope that in some way you could all get together and say, okay, whoever wins, let's support them 100%, or is that just understood, a gentleman's agreement?
No, I think you need to pin down every one of us and on that same question. When you have the other candidates here, you should ask them that same question. And let me just say this, absolutely. Whoever wins that nomination, and it's going to be me, by the way, but I will support them 100%. You got it. That's my promise.
That's what I think needs to happen, because I know many of us who've worked the polls and everything else know that sometimes someone, when they're disappointed in their candidate not getting the nomination, will not vote for the Republican nomination, which just blows your mind, but it's really sniveling.
Yeah.
So I would hope that all the people running for the slot, you know, make it clear to their opponents, support our nomination. So
Yeah.
I thank you for doing that.
And absolutely, you got my commitment.
Right.
And if I break that, I know who's going to come after me too. I'm not afraid of my opponents, but I am afraid of you. All right, thanks a lot, everybody. I'll be hanging around.